So demonstrators are calling it the autonomous zone in Seattle.
Rather than being called an autonomous zone, it should be labeled an occupancy protest.
While its name may still be up for debate, the CHAZ or the CHOP is the opposite of the images that define Seattle's protests.
This was the polar opposite vibe of what it was when the police and National Guard were there unleashing violence upon peaceful protesters.
Hello, everyone. On behalf of Character Media, I am Leanne Kim. We are now in the midst of not just one, but two pandemics, one caused by a biological virus and another caused by systemic racism that has reached a boiling point. Today, we are talking to someone who is caught in between. His restaurant is located in the heart of Seattle's autonomous zone known as CHOP, Capitol Hill Organized Protest, a 6-block area that has been occupied by Black Lives Matter protesters since June 8th. Our guest is Peter Pak, owner of Oma Pop, a popular Korean-American restaurant, to give us his firsthand account of what's going on. Peter, thank you so much for joining us. These are incredibly fraught times, and I just have to ask you first, how are you doing and how are you guys holding up?
It's very interesting times, to be honest. This year, just in general, for us as a whole, as a country, has been a year of the unknown, and it definitely has lived up to that, even to this day. It's been quite a challenge.
Right, and restaurants in general, they operate by such thin margins, and Oma Pop, like most restaurants in the U.S., was already severely impacted by COVID-19. You couldn't have also foreseen yet another big event, which were the protests that happened in Seattle. And the reason why that 6-block area in which your restaurant has been occupied is because police actually abandoned their station in that area. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so basically the protest was the first week of June, was when they really started bringing the movement to the Capitol Hill area and to the East Precinct. And so I think there was almost three or four straight nights of protesting at the East Precinct with the police still there.
It was pretty violent too. There was like a lot of clashes with police using, in riot gear as well as tear gas.
Yeah, it was very surreal because we were right there. I mean, we were there one of the times where tear gas was thrown into the general area and people were running towards us. We were handing out free food and water to the protesters in support of them. It was just very shocking to see and hear, these bombs go off and then all of a sudden the crowd just running towards you. To experience a protest firsthand, right in front of your own eyes, having established business there, to see, the protests just really stake their ground for the civil rights. And so, day by day that, how this area has been from one day, a few tents turned into 10 tents, 10 turned to 20, and there's probably 30, 40 of tents, people, occupying the space 24/7.
You mentioned tents, but I had heard and read somewhere that it's grown to the point where they're having outdoor movie screenings and food tastings. Can you give us a little bit more visual interpretation from what you see of what it looks like there now that we're 5-6 days into the occupation?
Just like you said, there's all of that. There's free food, there's free water, there's even a tent with free clothes. They've planted at least 5 or 6 gardens. There's a lot of beautiful artwork. They did a nice Black Lives Matter. It's all of that and more. I mean, it's very surreal because there's really no governing and no one really ruling the space.
Right, and that's the unique part of this particular protest because there is no designated leader. And with that, without a designated leader, there's questions as to who then is in charge of coordinating the demands of the protesters with political leaders there. Tell me about if there's any concerns or anxiety about just how long this may last and its longer impact to Oma Pop and the other businesses in the area.
For the most part, from what I've heard, is that business is supportive of the movement, of the protests. We have been supportive in providing food, providing water, providing restrooms for them to use. And as far as the length and time and longevity of this, I mean, it's pretty much an unknown. We have yet to see the local government, step in at any point. I haven't seen a police officer in the area for over a week now.
Help me understand. So while this occupation is going on, are you actually open for business? And if so, are people from outside of the CHOP area, are they allowed to come in and get takeout? What's the situation with your restaurant?
Basically, when the protesting first happened, that first week of June was pretty interesting because we didn't know what to expect. And what happened was that those first few days, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I remember in particular, the protest groups came. It was scary because of, like I said, of what we saw that past weekend, of the fires and the looting and all that. But my main concern as a business owner is for the safety of my workers. And so immediately we decided to shut down. I think we shut down by 5 o'clock that day, on that Monday. And we proceeded to do the same thing on that Tuesday and also that Wednesday, just because it was the fear of the unknown. We didn't know what to expect. But those first 3 days of protests actually ended up being very peaceful, very well organized. What happened was that Thursday, after going through 3 days of this, I rounded up my employees, I sat them down and let them know how I felt. First thing that I wanted to express to them was that my main concern was their safety. Secondly, I also wanted to express to them that I do support the Black Lives Matter movement and that I do believe that this is a monumental and historic time in history. We're a part of this neighborhood, we're a part of this community, and we've seen this protest go on for the last 3 days. But I wanted their approval as a team that hey, this is what I believe, and with your support, why don't we show our support to the protesters and to this movement by providing them with food, and let's raise some money to donate to the cause. And we did that. This is a time for us to step up. We've been in business for 9 years. City and community has supported us for 9 years. This is the least that we could do. We got our windows boarded up, not 100%. But one of the large windows that's next to our front door, one of my employees who happens to be African-American did a great mural. It's become kind of like a spot that people have turned into a mural to bring flowers and candles and so on. So.
Well, I appreciate you talking about the intimate conversation that you had with your employees. I'm assuming that a lot of businesses across the country are having the same conversation. I wanted to ask you, as the owner, is your support for Black Lives Matter as a result of the recent events, or is this something that you've always felt as a person of color?
Well, as Asian American, have felt racism growing up. So I think, this movement has really made me realize, all lives do matter, but it's the Black lives that matter right now. It's our time to support the Black Lives Matter movement.
That's a very inspirational perspective, Peter. And I am sure also that it helps that you have 2 young children at home. And so being a father and a family man kind of changes your lens of how you view the world too. I'm wondering how, when your girls get older, because we are experiencing history right now, how would you explain to them what's happening?
As a father, it definitely, brings a different perspective on life. I actually mentioned this to my workers as well as motivation, is that, this is a time in history that you'll never forget. Would you want to look back and reflect at this time 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and say that we shut our doors and that we just kind of hid behind a wall and did nothing? Reflecting upon this time, when my daughters do get older, I think it'd be great to kind of let them know is that hey, I had a business during that time, and that business was right in this community and part of the city, and we helped to provide for this purpose and this movement. And so I think it'll be a great story to tell. It may seem a little intimidating because of the streets. I mean, if you were an outsider and you came to this neighborhood, you'd be shocked because every single entrance to this neighborhood, they're literally blocking the streets. But when you actually walk up, the people are extremely friendly. I've never had any issues of not letting me in. What I'd like to obviously express, there are times in life where you just need to step up. You need to take advantage of the opportunities, really stand up for, your people and your community. So.
Well, Peter, thank you so very much for speaking with me in Character Media about your personal experiences and your reflections as you are still in the midst of all of this. I'm so happy to hear that you feel safe and that things are peaceful there. And of course, we wish you and your family and all the folks at Oma Pop continued health and safety. Thanks again.
Thanks, ma'am.